Hey, Newsa-Cast listeners, you can find every episode on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. Please help us grow by subscribing or sharing the Newsa-Cast, or follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. Now, let's get this show on the road.
And then when I wrote it, I got all done and I wrote it and then I reread it. And yeah, I was sitting there crying in my office, and I don't do that very often. So it's not a regular occurrence.
Welcome to the Newsa-Cast. What is a Newsa-Cast? It's where we bring local folk stories to life through conversation.
All right, Newsa-Cast listeners, welcome to episode 17 of the Newsa-Cast. We are going back to Lawrence, back to the Blue, and talk a little bit about Lawrence history with an amazing guest, Joe Vanden Acker, who is the sports information director. And this is a great interview. I've known Joe since when I started at Lawrence in 1999. I was an assistant coach for baseball, and Joe came on as the sports information director at that time. So it's a great interview. It was good catching up with Joe. Super informative. I'm going to tell you, if you didn't know a lot about Lawrence University, you're going to find out a lot about Lawrence University. He is the history. He knows the sports. He knows pretty much everything you want to know about it. So it's going to be a great interview.
Yeah, Tosh, he was awesome for sure. One of the better interviews. All of our interviews have been really good, but yeah, Joe just has a way of telling stories and captivating the audience for sure. So we
kind of what the Newsa-Cast is all about, telling stories and hearing the stories about different people. So that's awesome. I think it's going to be a great interview, and we get to hit a little bit on Lawrence one more time. But before we do that, Joe, we have level 2 playoffs coming up for football, high school football here in Wisconsin.
Yes.
We have a lot of teams from the Valley moving on. We have FVL, Wrightstown. We have Kimberly. We have Fond du Lac. We have Neenah, just to name a few.
Right. Kimberly, I think the Kimberly-Stevens Point game in level 2, that'll be a heck of a game. I was fortunate.
FVL's.
Go ahead. Well, I officiated both teams, and not that really means a whole lot, but I feel like that, just from that standpoint, I feel like that's going to be a pretty competitive, evenly matched game. That's going to be a good one to watch.
Yeah, both traditionally pretty decent programs. Spash is always has a decent program with a lot of their sports, just like Kimberly does. So
yeah,
two traditionally powerhouses in the state of Wisconsin. We have FVL moving up to Notre Dame to take on the Tritons of Notre Dame. Number 2 versus number 3 matchup. That's going to be a good one as well.
Absolutely. I like Notre Dame. Notre Dame has a nice little field tucked in there off of, I don't even know what street that is. Mason Street, maybe?
I think it's Mason. Yeah. I think it is.
But some good times on that field. That's
going to be a good one. We have another, not football, but another big sport this week as well. Number 1, Xavier girls volleyball is taking on number 2 FVL. They're going at it a second time, and who knows what's going to happen when you play a team the second time.
Yeah,
that is a huge rivalry, a huge game to move on to the next round. Just that'll be a fantastic match.
Yeah, looking forward to that one, definitely. And AppletonSports.com. Listen, Paul will have coverage of that for sure. That's going to be a heck of a the great time of year, isn't it, Tosh? I mean, this is all these sports are peaking, and so when you want to be playing your best ball, no matter what ball that is.
And like you said, we can't cover everything here, but you can get all your coverage at AppletonSports.com. So check that out, and check out those those articles about your favorite Appleton teams.
You got
it. And speaking of Appleton,
yes,
I think this would be a good time, since we are doing another Lawrence episode, just to talk a little bit about Lawrence. And one of my memories, and this isn't even sports related, there used to be this great event in the spring at Lawrence University called Celebrate.
Yeah, I remember that.
You remember going to Celebrate?
Absolutely. Yeah.
That was when we were in high school, but they had the big hill behind
Law Street right there.
Law Street there
Mhm.
before the Warsh Center.
Right.
Before that was built. And they would have bands at the bottom of the hill, and you just sit on the hill. You'd listen to music. The college had beer. They had food. They had events set up all over the place. It was a great community event.
Yeah.
And I don't know what exactly happened to it, but that was always fun. I remember, being in high school, going to Celebrate. Looks like the college kids were having a blast at the time as well.
Oh, absolutely. Didn't they? So that arts building, there's those steps that are back there. It's sort of an amphitheater. There have been bands there too. Was that part of Celebrate as well, or was that something different?
That's a good question. I don't even know if the arts building came after they did Celebrate.
I can't remember.
It might have been built later. But you know what? Lawrence has had a big tradition, and I think it's one of their missions is to really be part of the community.
Oh, and they always have been, yeah.
Always have community events. It's a great school. Primarily a lot of people think of it as a music school, but you have to remember it is one of the top liberal arts schools in the entire country.
Yeah.
Consistently rated as one of the top schools.
Oh, some on the street say it's the Midwest Harvard.
That's exactly.
Yes.
And if you do like music, you can always go and listen to the incredible students who are majoring in music and listen to them play. Free concerts a lot of the time, just going to those. Another great community event is their jazz weekend that is put on.
Yes.
They bring in tremendous artists from all over the country and the world for that matter. So
yeah, that stuff goes on, Tosh. We don't even realize it all the time at Lawrence. It's always going on, and I don't take advantage of it. I live right there, and it's
right. Yeah. And we haven't even brought up the sports.
Yeah.
Which is a big thing we're talking about this week with Joe Vanden Acker. But, besides football and hockey, a lot of the sports you can go and watch for free.
Mm-hmm.
And, I want to bring this up because I don't think people really realize there's only about 3% of high school athletes that go on and play at a college level anywhere. So you're still talking about some of the best athletes that were in their schools, and they're coming here to play at Lawrence. And you're also seeing some of the best athletes who they're playing in their conferences as well.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Encourage people to get out to the Bonta Bowl and watch football. Go watch some baseball and softball. Check out the two basketball teams, the girls and the guys this year. It's going to be fantastic and fun to watch after what Joe has said as well. Baseball, softball. I mean, you want to see an interesting sport, they have fencing.
Yeah.
Right.
And Tosh, we talked about this with Joe. The fields that you go, the sport is great. The athletes are great, but the venues are incredible as well. I mean, I'm going to go to a basketball game this year. I haven't been to Alexander Gym in a couple of decades, but he's right. That's a great building, an old building, a classic college gymnasium, with some great games.
Absolutely.
And the Bonta Bowl, you and I have both said it. That's for sure the best high school field around, and I'd argue one of the top D3 fields out there
easily.
Yeah,
absolutely. They've done so much to that field. It's a gem in this area as well. You know what? They have some great facilities, and one of the things that you may be seeing around Lawrence right now is that they're improving all of their facilities as well. Baseball field and softball field are currently being ripped up and putting new turf in for the spring. So they continuously are improving on what they have to try to attract those students that they want to have at their college, at the university, and provide them with that next level athletic and student athlete experience.
Yeah, I mean, they're making improvements too, Tosh, to College Avenue, right? Putting that building on Drew and College.
Right.
That's going to be cool. And on that same corner, just across the street, they would really, that entrance looks beautiful with that arch sign. And But Lawrence has been a part of Appleton since Appleton started. I mean, the two have grown and lived together for forever. They're one. You know, that campus, obviously downtown is not downtown Appleton without Lawrence, and you know, downtown isn't what it is, you know, what vice versa. But it's
absolutely.
It's been here a long time. It's a beautiful campus, like you said. I mean, just the academics are I mean, we joke about the Midwest Harvard, but it really is that that's no joke. That it's that good.
It is. And, you know, like we said, encourage you to get out, to walk around campus, to get to some music events, definitely get to the sporting events, and enjoy the university, Lawrence University here in Appleton, Wisconsin. Well, we hope you enjoy this episode. And as you continue to listen to this episode and all of our episodes, remember, you can catch them on any place you get your streaming podcasts. But also don't forget to check out TikTok, check out Instagram, X, YouTube, any of those. And remember to like and subscribe as much as you possibly can.
Yes, like and subscribe.
All right, Newsa-Cast listeners, it's time for that look at history that everybody loves, and that's our old look at new. And we always run into some pretty interesting history, whether it's local, whether it's state, whether it's national. It doesn't even have to be about sports. It's an old look at new.
It is.
So, Joe, you want to go first? Or do you want me to tackle this one?
Well, I can tell you, Tosh. I mean, everything you said, that's what old look at new is. But can I throw legend in there? I stumbled across a legend. And in fact, remember last week we were talking about parks, and I was looking at parks and I found the legend of Tallulah. So the legend of Tallulah, it's one of Fox Valley's favorite I've found, but it's about this beautiful Fox Indian princess. And obviously her name is Tallulah, this beautiful dark-haired girl that was the daughter of the Fox chief. So there were these two braves, basically two strapping young lads, I'm assuming. One of these kids was from another tribe. They both wanted Tallulah as their wife. So a little power struggle back there. So the chief didn't know what to do. So they decided that they were gonna run for the princess. So the chief set up this race where the starting point would be far up the Fox River, and Tallulah would be waiting for the winner at one of the largest sulfur springs, which is basically kind of pretty close to where Tallulah Park stands right now.
Okay.
So the chief, wanting obviously his tribesmen to win, he doesn't want some, competing tribe to get Tallulah, kind of rigged the race. So he tells his man, he kind of shows him a shortcut, how to get to Tallulah quicker. So the race starts, and of course the guy takes the shortcut. He gets to Tallulah first, and the deal was that's who Tallulah was going to marry. So Tallulah was heartbroken. Nobody really realized that Tallulah really liked the other one much better. In fact, was in love with that other one. So didn't work out that way. So rumor has it, legend has it, that ever since then, she would go to these springs that were located right by Tallulah Park and sit and weep and cry for her long lost love that she didn't have.
Wow. All right. The legend of Tallulah. So next time you're at Tallulah Park, remember the legend of Tallulah.
Yes.
Very nice.
Yes. After a Fox Indian princess.
That's awesome.
Yes.
I have to follow that. Well, October 22nd, 1939. NBC becomes the first network to televise a pro football game.
Yeah. Oh, God,
Brooklyn. Yeah. Was it team from Brooklyn beat the Philadelphia? I think they're actually called the Brooklyn Dodgers. Beat the Philadelphia Eagles 23-14 at Ebbets Field.
Yes.
So 1939, the first network television football game.
Boy.
And now Thursday nights, Sunday nights, Monday nights.
Yeah, every night, really.
Right?
Throw college
every
in there.
night.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, it's unbelievable. Yeah, it makes you think about just the advancement in technology and how much that's exploded. And
can you imagine a game at Ebbets Field for football?
That'd be when you're on Facebook or whatever, you click on some stuff and obviously the algorithm or whatever finds whatever you're interested in. So I must have been clicking on like old baseball or old stadiums. So it'd be blimp shots or airplane shots of old, but Ebbets Field was one of them. And you can kind of, they all those cool old New York East Coast ballparks were like oddly shaped, but you could see where a football field would sort of fit in there. And I mean, the views had to just be horrible. You'd be 100 yards away from the field, but
exactly. That'd be crazy.
How about the Brewers by County Stadium? Remember that?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yep. That's true.
Yeah.
So 1939, first televised pro football game. So I think that's a pretty good old look at new this week. You get the legend, and let's face it, thinking of football and television now, that's probably pretty legendary as well.
Yes,
having the first professional game televised. So
unreal.
And that's our old look at new.
All right, Tosh, we are on to one of the best interviews we've had on the Newsa-Cast. A friend of yours, you've known Joe Vanden Acker for a long time. Lawrence, information director, historian, but this was a good one, Tosh. I had a lot of fun. I learned a lot.
Yeah, you know what? Joel came on in 1999, came from the Oshkosh Northwestern, and he became a sports information director. It's the same time I became an assistant baseball coach at Lawrence University. So got to work with him for like 10 years, and the guy's amazing. He knows so much. He dives in, and it becomes part of him. He knows the history of Lawrence all the way back. I mean, we were talking like the 30s. He knows records. He remembers the game that we coached where we beat number 3 Oshkosh after going 0 for everything on our spring trip. And it's still still the highest ranked team a Lawrence baseball team has ever beaten. So he brought that up as well. So, you're going to enjoy this. You're going to hear a lot of information about a lot of different sports, but just a lot about Lawrence and Lawrence history as well. So great person. He's at every single game, I think. Yes. So if you see him, go talk to him. He'll talk your ear off. He knows so much about Lawrence and the sports history and even just a lot of the history of Lawrence University.
Yeah, it's a good one, folks. Enjoy.
I'm super happy to bring you another Lawrence product. We got Joe Vanden Acker here, and Joe Vanden Acker is the sports information director. That's how I knew him 20 years ago or more when I was an assistant baseball coach at Lawrence and Joe came on. I tell you what, we're going to have some stories. We're going to hear some history, and you're going to get to know Joe a little bit better. So welcome to the podcast, Joe.
Good to be here.
The story goes back a while ago. I started coaching at Lawrence in the spring of 1999, baseball with Corey Krieger, and as his assistant. And you came on at that same time to Lawrence, didn't you?
Correct. I started in December of 99 and have been there ever since.
Yeah, we go back a long ways. I know we sometimes get stuck talking to each other at hockey games because I bring my kids all the time. And so we still run into each other. But, we'll get to the Lawrence part, but I want to get some of your background, talk about where you went to school, what you did in high school, and how reporting and sports information became something that really stuck with you and why you went into it.
Well, I'm a local guy. I grew up in the town of Menasha, right? My parents lived on the little neighborhood right behind George's Steakhouse. So I grew up right on the border. Had I lived in the next block, I would have been in the city of Appleton, but instead I was in the town of Menasha, and basically, grew up doing all the sports related things that most boys do. I played football and basketball and baseball because this was the 1970s, and we had a very sports centric family because I had 3 older brothers. Adrian's the oldest, and then Marty and my brother Anthony. And Adrian and Marty were, they were very good athletes. So I always looked up to them and wanted to be as good as they were at stuff. And so there were a lot of spirited games of one-on-one in the driveway and stuff like that. And those guys, they beat the crap out of me from time to time as well.
As older brothers should, right?
Yes. But it was a lot of fun. And I learned a lot. And, so I grew up there, playing in the Palisades Little League. And,
Sure.
I was an early soccer kid. I played a bunch of youth soccer but in the end, football kind of won out, and played football at Menasha and baseball. And then, went to Menasha High School and graduated from there, and ended up at UW Oshkosh because I really liked the Department of Journalism. There were some really good people teaching there, and Gene Hintz was kind of my mentor. He was an old sports writer. Gene had covered the Lombardi Packers, so he was one of those guys where you could learn a lot from him simply by him being around. Yeah. So I had a lot of great experiences with Gene. And then, once I kind of assumed I would go into broadcasting. That was my initial thought when I started college, but it just worked out that, I ran into I was in multiple journalism classes, and I had so many professors say, well, you're such a fine writer. You should probably do this. Ended up, and then of course Gene's influence, directed me towards sports. That was my passion, but I did other things first. When I graduated from college, I had degrees in journalism and history, and because I am a total history nerd, which works out great with what I do at Lawrence, because I'm the sports information director. That's my title, but I always say I'm the de facto athletic historian. I think it's safe to say that having been there now almost 24 years, I know more about Lawrence athletics history than anyone on the planet. But I started out I worked at a little weekly paper. I worked at the Ripon Commonwealth Press and won a bunch of awards there, worked there for multiple years. Great experience. My colleagues there, Jody Fraley and Tim Like, wonderful community newspaper people, and learned a lot from both of them. And of course, Tim Like, his father was the guy who hired me, Doug Like, and God rest his soul. Doug passed away, a long time ago now, probably almost close to 20 years. But he, the Like family there, they are the epitome of community newspaper folks. Right. And now they've sold the paper, but there's nothing like living in a small town and being part of that. Literally being part of the community. And as I was the sports guy, and so I'm covering Ripon High School and Ripon College and Green Lake and Rosendale Brandon, and sort of doing that stuff. Did that for multiple years, and then moved on to the Oshkosh Northwestern and literally covered everything from bowling. I used to, on every Monday for 3 years, I had to put together the bowling leaderboard and pick bowlers of the week and all that stuff, to the Super Bowl. I covered Super Bowl 31, Packers Patriots in New Orleans, and covered tons of Packer games, Badger football, all that stuff. But I was just talking about this with one of my student workers at Lawrence, and they said, "Oh, that's so cool," because I have my Super Bowl credentials framed and hanging on the wall in my office. Because how many times was I going to cover a Super Bowl? And I told him, I said, my favorite thing though is still all the small school stuff. There's nothing like, if you're a sports writer, at least for me, there's nothing like covering football on a Friday night in the fall, or being in that small gym, in places like Marquezan or Omro, and having it be just jam packed and everybody in town is there. That gets to the heart of, what our country is like. I mean, that is true Americana. And I really loved it. Thought I'd be a sports writer the rest of my life. And then my paper got sold. The Northwestern was family owned. The Haney and Schwalm families owned the paper, and Mr. Haney and Mr. Schwalm both passed away. And I ended up, I left, and as did every other sports guy that was there.
Yeah, exactly.
we all went on to different things, and I had a couple of job offers, and I ended up at Lawrence and dropped my resume off the day before I got married, and came back from my honeymoon in Hawaii, and they called me and said, "Hey, would you, we'd like to interview you," and here I am, nearly a quarter century later. So,
did you have, when you were in high school? I mean, did you know that journalism was something that, I mean, I'm going to Oshkosh, I'm going to go into journalism, they have a good department. Is that like, you knew as a high school kid that this is what you wanted to do?
You know, I figured it would be some sort of career in the media. That was kind of what I thought. But I really was thinking, you know, I would be involved in radio or television. Sure. And that was my first focus. I certainly have the face for radio, but I ended up, and I worked at the college radio station, did that stuff. And, you know, but I kind of thought that's where I would end up. But, you know, I mean, I knew I was a good writer, and that always came through. Obviously I got straight A's in English and that sort of thing, but I really didn't know until probably about my junior year at UWO that I was probably going to be a print journalist. And then, like I said, once I got into it, I kind of thought that's what I do forever. And I did it for 12 years. I worked at the Post-Crescent as a college student. Yep. Dan Flannery was my sports editor. Wonderful guy. Great journalist. And then, moved on to Ripon and Oshkosh and then ended up at Lawrence. And I always say, you know, you end up where life takes you, and whether you believe it or not, that's probably where you're supposed to go. And for me, it was Lawrence. And I had a connection with Lawrence because I had been going, you know, I grew up just a few miles from the Bonta Bowl, and my grandparents lived at 911 East Washington Street. So they lived just across the river from the gym. And so, I mean, I had been to the Bonta Bowl many times to watch football. In fact, Scott Reppert was just at our game the other day. And
nice.
When we played the homecoming football game with Beloit last Saturday, and Scott was there, and you know, we were talking about 1981. I remember going to the NCAA Division III playoff game. It was the national quarterfinals against the University of Minnesota Morris. And boy, the Bonta Bowl was packed. We actually sat on the visiting side, on the east side of the stadium, because we had like an ice storm, you know, kind of a snow sleet sort of mix the night before. And it was really cold. And the ice had just like frozen to those old fiberglass bleachers we used to have. Exactly. So we sat on the other side because we were in the sun and it was a lot warmer. but I remember seeing Pat Schwanke catch the winning touchdown pass in overtime right in front of me. So I always had a connection with Lawrence. My best friend was a Lawrence football player. So, you know, we would go watch him play, and, you know, so I'd been there many, many times, but working there has been a great experience.
That's good.
No other way to say it.
Joe, I remember, I definitely remember Scott Reppert in those years as well. I mean, that Lawrence football was something else back then. You're right. The Bonta Bowl was full. Do you envision a day where football gets back to that at Lawrence? I mean, you guys, Tosh and I talk about this all the time. The Bonta Bowl is maybe the best venue that I can think of as far as a football field, a setting and just comfort. It's one of the top places to play. What do you envision something like that again for football?
Well, I certainly hope so. The bowl, just speaking about the bowl, I mean, it is a fabulous place to watch a game. If you've never been to a game at the Bonta Bowl, you need to come. Whether you're a huge football fan or whether you're a big Lawrence fan, or it doesn't make any difference. You just need to come and experience it because you sit so close to the field, you know, in there. And then, you know, at this time of year, you know, the trees have changed, and there's the on that south end of the field where the ravine is, you know, now you get the fall colors, and it's just really pretty, and so you get that part of it too. But you know, it's a natural amphitheater, and that was the idea, because if you go on the other side of East South River Street, so the south side of East South River, you can see how the ravine runs through there. There's a little creek at the bottom, and basically what they did was, back in, you know, the mid 1960s, George Bonta, who of course was the president of Bonta Paper Company in Menasha, and he was a Lawrence grad. He wanted to build a football stadium in that natural amphitheater of that ravine. And so they cut down the trees and kind of cleared it out, and they ran the stream underneath the football field. So there's no way the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources would let us do that now. back in 1964 when they were building the stadium, a little different story. So they ran the creek under the field. It still runs under the field. In fact, we replaced the culvert that it runs in when the stadium was renovated in 2015. Sure. So, and that was it. Mr. Bonta basically donated all the money to build the facility. And originally it was the Lawrence Bowl. He did not want it named after him. And then when he died in 1978, they renamed the stadium in his honor, and it's still the Bonta Bowl today. Now, of course, the field is named for Ron Roberts, of course, legendary coach and all that. But it is a great place to watch a game. But I always say this, I love our football coaches. Tony Acker, who's our head coach. And then we have three full-time assistants. Andy Piter. Andy's a local guy. He's from Denmark. Matt Sosinski, who's another local guy. He's from Princeton. And then Josh Sharon, who is, he's an Indiana native. But those guys, boy, they know what they want to do and they know how they want to do it. And, we just kind of need to get the guys in here to get it done. So I think they have a great plan in place. And I have the advantage, I guess, for lack of a better term, of every once in a while, we use the Bonta Bowl press box because that was also renovated when the stadium was redone. And it's a big space because what the football team does is they practice in the bowl every day, and then they will use the coaches' booths and the main press box booth to review video. So we have video systems in there so they can watch. And the main press box area is large enough where you can have 30 guys in there watching film. So like the whole offense can meet or the whole defense can meet. Well, they also use that to entertain recruits. So after games, they'll bring recruits upstairs. So high school kids, they'll come to the press box, and there might be a dozen of them in there with their parents, and then Tony gives them the recruiting pitch, and it's one of those, and Tosh has been in on tons of these sorts of meetings, and and I've seen it many, many times. I've never seen anyone who is quite as passionate, for lack of a better term, as Tony Acker. When Tony's talking about Lawrence football and what he wants to do and all that, it is like Reverend Tony. It is the Church of Tony, and the game is football. And man, he is. It's kind of an amazing thing. I always think, boy, if you walk out of one of those meetings and you don't want to play for Tony Acker, then there might be something wrong with you, because it is a very, very passionate appeal, and he's a good guy. I really like Tony and the staff, and I mean, we're having a rough year. We have not won a game yet, but those guys are, like I said, I think they're doing all the right things. As I look at it from an outsider's perspective, I'm not a football coach, but I think they're doing all the right things. And it just becomes a question of, it might take another year or two before we get the sort of players that we need and want, or the guys mature. And once again, Tosh, you've seen that many times, the difference between a player as a first year and a player as a junior and a senior. The development factor is big, and it's really big in football, just the physical changes that take place. So yeah, I'm actually, I hate to say it, but I'm actually pretty, with all evidence to the contrary in terms of wins and losses, I'm actually still very optimistic about this group of guys. This is as good a group of football coaches as we've had. I would say since Chris Howard first started in 2004. That was a very good group. And then when a lot of those guys left to, because they got other jobs. And then, of course, Chris's wife, Mimi, got cancer. And, that just kind of derailed the football program a bit, kind of circumstances beyond his control a little bit. But this is as good a group of coaches as we've had in a long time.
I think there's a lot of excitement with Lawrence athletics right now, because there is a renewed interest. I mean, you can just see it around campus that there's money being put into athletics. I mean, back when I was there in the early 2000s and stuff, it wasn't quite as prevalent as it is now. And I think kids are going to see that too. So they're recruiting for all these coaches, and the coaches are doing a great job. And I think the kids are going to come. It's a beautiful campus.
You're 100% right about the commitment part. And that goes right from the top, from President Lori Carter and the Board of Trustees. And then our boss, Jason Imparati, the Director of Athletics. We have just seen a renewed commitment to athletics. That's probably the best way to say it. You know, the Whitingfield track just got redone. They put the lines down last week, and track had their first fall practice on their new track. So that was a multi-million-dollar project that was completed.
Wow.
And then the team complex in the Bonta Bowl. So basically, now as you see the bowl now, there's the building that we use for football locker room, bathroom, concessions, the Gilboy Center, and right across the plaza, as we call it, from that, kind of where the old building used to be that housed everything, that was up against the hillside. There's a brand new building there, the team complex, and that will house, in the fall, locker rooms for men's and women's soccer. And then once we start playing lacrosse in the spring of 2025, the lacrosse teams will use those locker rooms as well. And then there's a big visitor space, which we can split in half for when we host visiting soccer, because we play soccer doubleheaders basically in the Midwest Conference, or the visiting football team. Or we can split it in half and host high school football, where we can have 2 locker rooms down there for high school teams as well.
Nice.
So, and that, once again, that's a multi-million-dollar project, and that will be done here in the next couple of weeks. So we hope to use it yet this fall, either for hosting the Midwest Conference soccer tournament and football. So we're still in the hunt to host the conference soccer tournament, but because our women's team just clinched a berth in that. So we're
fantastic.
Hoping to maybe sneak in and host it, but we're gonna have to win the last 2 and sort of see what happens. But yeah, when Ripon, our last home game is November 11th against Ripon, and when they're here, they will probably be the first football team to use the new locker room. And then we've also, as Tosh and I were talking a little earlier, they just tore off the turf at baseball and softball. So they're putting down a new dirt and grass across both of those fields, because they hadn't really been, that hadn't been done, probably since the late 2000, maybe 2006, 2007.
Yeah, I was going to say, we put a new infield in and a new outfield in the time I was there.
Yep.
So it's been a while.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So that's being done as well. And then, we also spent several $100,000 redoing the tennis courts as well down at the bottom of the Drew Street Hill there. They resurfaced completely and kind of took up the top layer of asphalt, put down new asphalt, and then a new playing surface there. And my daughter is really excited about that, of course, because she's a Lawrence tennis player. So the new surface, it looks really nice. And that facility is also, and we've been playing tennis down there. I've seen photos going back to the 1930s. Wow. So Lawrence tennis has been playing next to the river for a really long time. And of course,
that's another great facility. I mean, it's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's got to be, when you look at it from a player standpoint and from a fan standpoint, you're sitting on top of the hill, you get to look out basically at the courts and the river, and it's pretty nice. And I got to do some self-promotion here, because young Anna Vanden Acker, who is a sophomore at Lawrence, she went to St. Mary Catholic here, which is not far from our house out in Fox Crossing. Yeah. She was named All Midwest Conference this past week.
Congrats.
So
congratulations. That's awesome.
She was very excited. I was really happy for her. She had a really good fall season. Made a big jump from playing number 5 singles to playing number 2, and then she went from number 3 doubles to number 1, and she had a good year. Lots more improvements to make, but she did very well.
That's a proud dad moment right there.
Oh yeah,
fantastic.
You bet.
No, love to hear that. Joe, you touched on briefly lacrosse is going to start in the spring of 2025, and we had Coach on a few episodes ago. What went into adding a sport at Lawrence to add lacrosse? That had to be a lot of steps to add a sport. Was that the only sport you added? Do you have to add a girls and a boys team? I guess, what is the process to add a sport at the college level?
Yeah, we've actually in the last few years here, we added women's hockey. We've had a men's hockey program since the mid 1980s. I think 86, 87 was their first season. So it seemed natural to add the women's program, and went ahead and did that. And they actually played some exhibition games here over the weekend, so they're off and running. But yeah, adding lacrosse, it was something that, boy, that had been talked about. I'm trying to think of how far back that goes. I mean, it's something that we had talked about for a bunch of years. But once again, when Lori Carter came on board as the new president, that was something that she put out there as a priority to basically increase sort of our athletic footprint in a lot of colleges. And we certainly have not been one of them in this regard, where there are a lot of schools who are struggling financially. And we have those right in our own backyard. I mean, we know that there are certain challenges at places like Marion and Lakeland. I think Rippon's had some financial struggles as well with enrollment, but what keeps them going is the number of athletes they can bring in. And so that's part of it. We looked at adding lacrosse as a way to add some more students, absolutely, but also as a way to sort of diversify our athletic footprint a little bit. And then you start going through the process of how are you going to do this? Who's going to coach the teams? Where are they going to play? I mean, all that stuff. What conference are they going to be in? And that has not been decided yet. We're still investigating that. There's 2 lacrosse leagues here in the Midwest, so we will end up playing in one of them. But yeah, Mikey Zadroga is the new men's coach. We will have an announcement on a new women's coach here relatively soon as well. So that getting that done, that was big. But lacrosse was one of those things where it made sense for us because we already have the facility. We have the Bonta Bowl. So, the turf will change here a little bit when they put down the lacrosse lines. But we already have a facility in which we can play, which quite honestly will be really, really nice because it's already great for football and soccer, and nothing's going to change for lacrosse. So that's a big part of it, where you have that. And then the next part is finding the right people to lead and build a program. And as you guys probably know from talking to Coach Zadroga, he does not lack for enthusiasm. So he will get after it, no question. Yeah. And that's the other thing. You have to find the right person who wants to take on that challenge of starting from scratch, because that can be difficult. We saw that with women's hockey. And I think, but Mikey, he's off to a flying start. He has a bunch of guys already committed for that 24-25 academic year. So he's doing very well.
It seems like a natural sport for Lawrence. I feel like Lawrence always should have had a lacrosse team.
And we did. That's there was club lacrosse, going back decades. I mean, we enlisted the help of the university archivist, and we found photos of guys playing club lacrosse here going, back to the 1960s and 70s. So there's always been a little bit of a presence with it. Rugby was the other one. They played a lot of rugby. They used to play on that field that was next to the dormitory for the Institute of Paper Chemistry, right across the street from the gym, which is where all those condos are now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, when I was a kid, that was a wide open field because I used to play in that field all the time because my mother cleaned that dormitory every morning from Monday through Friday, 8 to 12, and she would drag me along. I was in grade school, and she couldn't leave me at home, so she took me with her, and then I'd walk out there with my baseball glove and a ball and entertain myself for the next 4 hours. But they used to play rugby on that field, and now we've got the ready-made site for lacrosse. Right. So
what year was Alexander Gym built? How old is that built?
Alexander, it's been around since 1929. Henry Merritt Riston, who was the president, laid the cornerstone himself back in 1928. But the funny part is there was one guy in particular who wanted, because there was a previous Alexander Gym. That was the original Alexander Gym. And that stood roughly where Young Child Hall is now. So we have the where our wellness center is and where the president's office is, their Sampson House. It's that right behind that, sort of behind Main Hall and a little to the left.
Sure.
And that's where the original Alexander Gym was. That was where the first Wisconsin high school state basketball tournament was played.
Wow.
And so everybody thinks it was played in the Alexander Gym that we have now, but it was actually played in the old Alexander Gym.
Okay.
But back in the 1920s, they were going to build a new Alexander Gym. And the guy, L.M. Alexander, he was the president of the board of trustees. He was going to donate the money to build it. And of course, Henry Merritt Wriston, he said, well, we should build it next to our new football field and our track, because we were playing football at Whiting Field, and that had been the track. I think they put the track in 1925. So we already had athletic facilities there, and he wanted to build the gym there. And Mark Catlin had been the football coach, very, very successful. He's in the Lawrence Hall of Fame. And Catlin was a really interesting guy. Competed in the Olympics, the 1904 Summer Olympics in St. Louis. He played football at the University of Chicago for Amos Alonzo Stagg. I mean, went to law school. He was a lawyer. He was the Outagamie County District Attorney, and he was a state assemblyman. He lived right on Alton Street, right next to campus. And, well, Catlin said, don't separate athletics from academics. Let's build the gym. He wanted it built on the corner of College and Law. So where Kohler Hall sits now, that's where he wanted the gym built. And Henry Merritt Wriston basically argued the other way. He said, we already have athletic facilities over there. This is going to put our athletics in one place. So that was what Wriston wanted. And for several months, because when I was researching Catlin as a potential Hall of Famer, I went through months of old Appleton Post-Crescents, and they would write letters to the editor. So Catlin would write one saying, let's do this. And then Wriston would respond, and then Catlin would respond, and then Wriston would respond. And in the end, of course, Henry Merritt Wriston was the president, so he won. We built the gym on the south side of the river instead of the north side. But yeah, been there since 29. It was renovated really for the first and only time in 1985, when they removed the pool, because that building had a swimming pool. And of course, when Tosh was coaching with us, that was we called it the green room, because it had a green turf floor, and that's where the batting cages were. And that was the wrestling room as well back then.
I want to forget about those days. That smelled so bad.
And then now, of course, that is the weight room. And they took out when they renovated the building in 85, they covered up the old windows rather than replace them. So on the outside, I'm not sure what the material is on the outside, and the inside, it was this acoustic material. And in the new weight room, they actually put 3 of the windows back in. There were 5 of them down there. And so that gives that room a lot more natural light. Looks really nice. It's a really nice weight room now. But the building has really undergone some changes in the last few years. When Kim Tatro was still the AD, we redid the floor. That was the gym floor itself, because that floor has been there since 1985. And we put down the new Viking ship logo, and it looks really, really nice. And then we've done a lot of, I guess, what I would call branding in there in various parts of the building. So it kind of gave Alexander Gym, I would say she's a grand lady, but we gave her a little bit of a facelift, and that's helped a lot. It's still same thing. If you haven't been to a basketball game at Alexander Gym, because it's not big, but the way the court is situated in there, it basically, you walk in through the front doors, and the court basically runs east to west in there. And there's bleachers on one side and behind one basket, but the other 2 sides are walls. So you got the scorer's table and the benches on one side. There's a wall right behind us, and then you got the wall behind the other basket. So there's no place for that sound to go. So from the stands, when people cheer, that sound kind of pushes out right towards the players, and then it hits that wall and bounces right back. And when you put like 500 people in there, it's loud. You put 1,000 people in there, like we were doing for the NCAA tournament, some years back, it is just flat out deafening. It is really, really loud in there, but great place to play. And, I always say it's a classic old school gymnasium. It doesn't, we've dressed her up a little bit, but she's still very old school. And I'm an old guy. I like it that way. So
I kind of do. I agree with you. It looks great up there on the ledge, and it is. It's a grand old building. How does the basketball team look this year?
Actually, both teams should be. I think our women's team will actually really surprise some people. We lost in the space of 3 weeks last year. We lost 3 players with ACLs. Caroline Sharp, Maggie Culver, Emma Carlson, who were 3 of our top 5 players. So that really they were just starting to play well and sort of getting it, and that derailed them completely. So that was difficult. All 3 of them are back, and Emma Carlson is a 5th-year senior. She's our big player in the post. So we should surprise some people having those 3 players back and healthy. And we have there's a whole group of newcomers as well, but the one that I'm really interested to see is Talia Moe. She's Stevens Point. She went to Spash and basically broke a bunch of records there. She's a 5'10" point guard, and wow. Everything that I hear is that she is going to be phenomenal. So looking forward to watching her direct our attack, and really excited about that. And on the men's side, it was an odd off season for Casey Korn and his guys. We brought in a really nice group of first year guys last year, and then lost virtually all of them for various reasons. But none of them were really basketball related. It wasn't like, I want to play more. I'm not playing enough. It wasn't any of that. It was a couple of them were injury related. Nick Hesh, especially, where his family doctor and orthopedic guy basically said, well, if you don't want to have your knee replaced when you're 40, you should probably stop playing basketball. So we lost him. And then the other big one was Parker Prawl. He transferred to Stevens Point. I think he just wanted to be within shouting distance of home in Iola. So that was a big loss, because he's a very athletic guy. However, the group that Casey brought in this year is, I would say, better than the group we had last year that came in. And that was a very good first-year group. But there's a couple of guys to really watch in this group. One of them is Hogan Domofsky, who is he's a De Pere guy, so just won a state title with De Pere. And of course, his teammate, young Mr. Kinzinger. Of course, the Kinzinger boys, their father is Jeff Kinzinger, who's in the Lawrence Hall of Fame. I don't know that people realize that Jeff was a great athlete. He was our quarterback in the 1990s when we were scoring points like crazy. And, Jeff set all sorts of records as a quarterback back then. But yeah, his boys all gravitated towards basketball. But we got Hogan Domofsky, and I think he's going to have an immediate impact. And there's multiple other guys. I'm just getting a chance to watch them as they start practicing now. And once again, I think we're going to surprise some folks, because we do have, we have the 2 main guys we have coming back, Adnan Saranchik, who is one of my sports information assistants, and Matt Kaznikoff are both really good players. Adnan, very athletic. He's going to be tough inside. And then, boy, you throw all these young guys that we have. Depending on how they develop, Illinois College, without question, will be the best team in our league. But beyond that, I think it's fairly wide open. I think Monmouth will be decent. Cornell, I think, will be okay. Grinnell will be the same as they always are. It'll be a little crazy playing them, but I think Ripon has a new coach, so we'll kind of see how things go for them. They graduated a bunch of guys, so I think the men's conference is a little more up for grabs. I think if you hit it right and you start playing well at the right time, you could make a run, but yeah, Illinois College, they are going to be tough to beat. They're experienced, they're athletic, they're tough, and they're really well coached, which, I don't want to speak ill of someone who used to coach in the Midwest Conference, but back in the old days, Illinois College would roll in and they'd get off the bus and you'd think, wow, how are these guys look really impressive. And then you'd watch them play for about 15 minutes. You go, yeah, they're just not that good. they just didn't play very well together. And, we'd end up beating them by 20. And whereas now, that doesn't happen. They're a lot better and they'll be tough. I mean, I would think they'll be a team that's nationally ranked and they'll be the team to beat in our league. No question.
Okay. So Joe, it's obvious, a ton of not only history. What is a day like for you as a sports guy for Lawrence?
Well, even on Sundays, I still this morning I still did work. I'm a voter in the D3 football top 25 poll, so that was the first thing I did this morning was cast my vote. And yes, I voted North Central number 1 again. 3 WEAC teams in the top 7. But a typical day for me is, usually if we have a home event, then a lot of it involves getting ready for that, making sure that, I've done the game programs and that, the computers are ready to go because of course we have to set up for live streaming because we live stream virtually every event. We streamed 4 events on Saturday alone. So you have to have that. You have to make sure you have the student workers lined up and do all that. But there's other things in terms of I'm doing everything from on the course of a given day, nominating guys for Player of the Week in our league, picking my own Players of the Week because we call Vikings of the Week. So I do that every week as well. That's my Wednesday morning. That's the first thing I do on Wednesday morning. So. But there are just so many little different things that you end up doing. The days the activities are similar, but every day is a little bit different where I could do everything, like I said, from scoring a game to, doing, updating historical records, which I do at the end of every season and just, fielding questions. I mean, I got a question just last week before from a guy who played football here in the late 70s, early 80s. And he said, I was at Reunion here in June of 2023. And I looked at the football records, because I had been telling people that I had the record for the longest punt return. And he had a 93-yard punt return during his career. And then he said, I saw that I didn't have the record anymore, but that the guy who holds the record said it in like 1932. He was like, well, what happened? So I explained to him that, back in the early 2000s, we were doing research, or I was doing research on George Walter as a potential Hall of Famer. And George Walter played football at Lawrence, but he was also he was an administrator, professor, a dean for 40 plus years here. He's sort of a Lawrence legend. And as I was doing the research, I came across a newspaper clipping that showed that this guy, Merlin Find, his nickname was Smiley. Well, he had a 95-yard punt return for a touchdown. So I went back and I found that source in a couple of places, and I'm like, okay, I guess Hugh Delios doesn't have the record anymore, so I changed it.
Oh, man.
But he was surprised that he didn't have the record anymore. But just like stuff like that pops up, and I end up talking to, different people from literally around the country, it seems like, every week related to teams we're playing or places we're going to go or, different things that pop up related to Lawrence athletics. But a lot of it is, it's kind of a routine. You do sort of the same things every week, and then you take those weeks where it's maybe not as busy from an event standpoint, and you use that to catch up on certain things here and there. And then the weeks where you have a lot of home events, and we had 7 this last week, so it was very busy. And then you just sort of get through the week and move on to the next week. So this week there's only There's only 4 home events four home events this week. So it's a little quieter, but yeah, a typical day is the same, but always just a little tiny bit different. So
you have a lot of students that work for you.
Correct.
But you're the man.
Yeah, it's a one-man operation.
Yep.
Yes. Covering 22 teams. And I do have a great student staff this year, especially. There are guys, and I have multiple baseball guys who work for me. Zach Lesley, who's our all-conference first baseman, and Dylan Hunt, who pitcher for us. Avery Grayton, who was on the baseball team. He played a couple seasons. He works for me as well. So those baseball guys have always kind of formed the backbone of the staff.
Sure.
Because the busiest seasons are fall and winter. So they shoulder a lot of the load. Jonah Palmer is one of our pitchers. He works for me as well. But yeah, and then, we have other kids who fill in at different times. It's we had a lot of basketball players over the years. And this year, I think this is the most, in terms of women that I've ever had on the staff. But my daughter Anna works with us, and then her roommate, who's one of our soccer players, Erica Gruby, and Bailey Griffiths, who's one of our women's basketball players. But those student assistants, obviously, I can't be at everything especially when we have conflicting events. So you have to train those kids and hand it off to them and say, okay, this is what you need to do. And without fail, they handle that stuff. And as they're smart kids. They get into Lawrence for a reason. And you can basically tell them, hey, this is what you need to do. And you can leave them some instructions, but 99 times out of 100, they already know what they're doing and they do it well. And I was going to say, over the years, my first 2 student workers were 2 baseball guys, Chad Waller from Wapaka, and now Dr. Matt Smith from Albuquerque, New Mexico. And great guys. I mean, I love to tell the story. That spring of 2000 was my first baseball season at Lawrence. And that was when we used to play the 4-game series with the conference opponents. So we had 4 games with all the North Division teams. So Carroll, Beloit, Ripon, and St. Norbert at the time. And you guys would play the Thursday, Saturday series. So the rain dates were always Friday and Sunday in case you had weather issues. So Waller goes out, we're playing Ripon. He wins the first game on Thursday, complete game victory. And on one day's rest, he wins one of the games on Saturday.
Yes, he did.
And we sweep the doubleheader. We take 3 or 4 from Ripon. And I think Bob Gillespie, the Ripon coach at the time, probably still sees Chad Waller in his nightmares. But
absolutely.
That was amazing.
Chad didn't throw hard.
No.
He wasn't a hard thrower. but he had great placements.
Mm-hmm.
He had good control. Yeah, he was good. Yeah. Yeah, I remember that weekend. Oh, gosh. Those Thursdays, Saturdays.
Chris Clothier was one of my all-time great student workers. Toph, as we called him. Xavier Kidd. His mother is one of our great Lawrence super fans, without question. But yeah, those guys, like I said, those guys do so much work, and they don't get a lot of credit, for what they do. They will take abuse from time to time from opposing coaches and things like that. But boy, they come up big, and I couldn't do my job without them. And
that's awesome.
This is the best, like I said, one of the best staffs I've ever had.
Joe, do you still go back to your sports reporting days? Are you able to write a lot still these days, articles, things like that?
Yeah, but actually, we are hopeful that next year, that once we add lacrosse officially, once they start playing, I will actually get a full-time assistant finally. That's the plan. So we're hoping that actually happens, and that will allow me to write a little bit more, because that is the strength of what I do. And last year, I think it was must have been 2021. I was able to really put together some nice feature stories. That is the best thing that I do in terms of being a writer. And I won some writing awards from what used to be called the College Sports Information Directors of America, COSIDA. It's now CSC, College Sports Communicators. But I won a couple of writing awards that year. So I don't enter the writing contest very often, but both of those I really liked. And one of the stories, the young lady is still with us here, Callie Fanner still. She plays on the volleyball team, and her mother was a Lawrence volleyball player, and her mother died of breast cancer. So over the weekend here, this last weekend, we did the Dig Pink match, where it's basically a fundraiser for breast cancer research and awareness. And I wrote a story about her and her mom, and her mother had been deceased for, I think she died in 2018, if I'm not mistaken, and that was tough. Sometimes the old sports writer in me, I love telling the stories and letting people know what extraordinary young men and women we have. But, it tugs at my heartstrings too, from time to time, because I have a daughter who's that age, and you just think, boy, what would that be like if that was my family? And actually I think one of the best things I've ever written that did not win an award, it should have, because it was pretty good, was the story I did on Davis Ogilvy, who was one of our baseball players. And Davis has Tourette syndrome. Yeah. So he was one of our pitchers, and he was a really good hitter as well. But Davis, you would see the involuntary sort of movements that he would have. He would shake his head, almost like he was shaking off a sign, right, as a pitcher. And he would shake his head, or he would throw to first when there was nobody at first base. And I asked him, I'm like, Davis, why do you do that? And he said, well, my brain tells me I have to, so I do it. And, so that was a very interesting story to tell. And the fact that he could play at such a high level, because you think, there's a very small percentage of kids, high school, like even good high school players, who go on to play college sports. And right. Davis was a really good player. So for him to get to that level, that was a story I really wanted to tell. And it's still one of my, it's one of my all-time favorites. And at the end, I was so moved when we were talking, and I just, because Tourette's, as quickly as it came on for him, it can go away as well. And he was hoping that at some point the Tourette's would ease off and he would sort of return to quote unquote normal. And he, and the thing he said at the end when we were talking about that was, well, I just want to, meet someone and maybe get married and, have a family. And I was like, wow, because you think, oh, well, yeah, that's what everybody's going to do, right? You're going to get married and have kids or whatever. And for him to say it like, well, this is, I've got to overcome this, handicap to, or this disease just so I can, meet a nice girl and get married. I was literally, we were talking on the phone. So thank God he wasn't there, because I started to tear up. And then when I wrote it, I got all done and I wrote it, and then I reread it. And yeah, I was sitting there crying in my office, and I don't do that very often. So it's not a regular occurrence, but it was like stories like that. I love to tell them. And I actually have one in the hopper here that I'm hoping to tell in the next month or so about one of our soccer players who's she's dealing with some extraordinary physical circumstances as well to be able to play college sports. And I want to tell her story too.
And those are published where are those published? I'd love to read the story on Tourette's. I actually have Tourette's myself, so I'm well aware of that disease, and I'd love to read that story.
That one actually ran in the college's magazine, and boy, I'd have to look. That's like that's probably like a decade ago, at least. But yeah, the stories generally, they get published in the Lawrence magazine, a lot of them. And then, but the ones that are not slated for the magazine run on the Lawrence website at, vikings.lawrence.edu. And then the Post-Crescent, I have a unique relationship with the newspaper here just because of my background. The fact that I was a sports writer for a dozen years. Mike Sherry, who basically is the sports editor in Appleton, Mike and I were colleagues for 7 years at the Oshkosh Northwestern. So we know each other well. We spent many, many days sitting next to each other, producing, daily newspapers. So, if I can approach him and say, hey, I've got this great story, would you be interested in running it? And, 9 times out of 10, or maybe 10 times out of 10, Mike says, yes, send it to me and we'll run it. And he's been great. And that does allow us to have a little, footprint in the community as well from that regard. But yeah, everything runs on the Lawrence website at the very least. So
there were some great sports reporters, weren't there, back in the day with the Postcreston and Northwestern? I know you mentioned Dan Flannery, and Dan Vanderpass must have been there at that time, right?
Doctor, and I know Doctor well. Yeah,
it was John Poshton maybe a little bit before that, but he was.
He was. I did not. I don't think I ever met him. He was kind of funny in that John Poshton would, related to Lawrence, he would, and I think the sports editor did this a lot, he would give our guys nicknames. So, like, if you were a great Lawrence athlete, he would come up with some nickname for you, and that would be they would refer to you as that, like in a story or in a headline. The one I love is Dave Mulford. Dave Mulford was a great football player here in the late 50s, and he was also a hell of a track athlete. I think his junior and senior year, back then they ran in yards and not meters. He was undefeated in what would now be the 800 meters. So the 880 yard run, he was the best runner in the Midwest for small colleges. And he was from Rockford, Illinois. So John Poshton just started calling him the Rockford Rocket. And that nickname stuck. So when he got inducted into the Hall of Fame, I was not the chair of the Hall of Fame committee then, but I did all the research. And I reached out to him when he got voted in, and at that time he was the chairman international of Credit Suisse First Boston. So, fairly wealthy, powerful guy. Before that, he had been undersecretary of the Treasury. So in the in the Reagan administration and the George H.W. Bush administration. So, and then later under George W. Bush, he was U.S. ambassador to India. Okay. So really interesting individual. And so I call him in his office in London, and I get his assistant, and she says, well, Mr. Mulford's not here right now, but I can have him call you. And I said, well, I don't want to bother him if he's not working. And she said, no, he'll call you back. So like 30 minutes later, my phone rings in my office, and it's Dave Mulford. Nice. So we talk a little bit, and I mentioned the Rockford Rocket nickname to him, and he said, I haven't heard that in 50 years. And he thought it was hilarious. And so I said, well, I hate to bother you. I said, I'm not sure, where you are. He said, well, I'm in Zagreb. And I said, oh, what are you doing in Croatia? And he said, well, I'm brokering a deal to buy the telecommunications infrastructure of the country. I just laughed, and I said, oh yeah, I do stuff like that all the time. and he said, oh, trust me, Joe, it's not that complicated. And I said, well, I'll take your word for it. So then when I actually met him face to face, he was talking with our director of development at the time, Greg Volk. And I kind of waited for a break in their conversation. I walked over, and I just stuck my hand out, and I said, you must be the Rockford Rocket. And he started laughing. He goes, well, you have to be Joe. And I said, that's me. And now every time he comes to campus, I always make a point to go and see him and say hello. He's a really, really nice man.
Does the alum, you must get really good engagement from the alum. I mean, there must be a lot of pride in a Lawrence grad.
Yeah. Our alumni base they are incredibly dedicated to Lawrence. I think it speaks to their experience at the school, the time that they were there. But one of the things that go into like college rankings, like U.S. News and World Report and things like that, where you get ranked, and of course Lawrence is one of the we're one of the top 60 liberal arts colleges in the country. But part of that is one of the rankings criteria is how much do your alumni give back to the college? What percentage give back? And at Lawrence, it's consistently around the 50% mark. Wow. Which I'm a UW Oshkosh grad. I guarantee 50% of my fellow 1989 graduates are not giving back to UWL. So, I donate to Lawrence every year. It's just something that I always do. It's not a lot of money, but it's the principle of it for me. And we have a lot of that. We see that with alumni games where for a typical, and certainly men's basketball had so much success in that first decade of the 2000s. So those guys still come back. You might have, you go to an alumni game. We usually do that on a Saturday, like we're playing in the afternoon, and then they'll have an alumni game at like 10 in the morning, and there'll be 40 guys who show up, and they all want to play, and it gets pretty competitive as well. But it's the same with baseball. Baseball, softball. It's amazing how many alums show up. And like with softball, when Kim Tatro was the coach, he was the coach for 30 years. Yeah. So like her softball alumni game, it was a huge reunion. You just had all these women who would come back on a weekend and hang out, play the alumni game, have a meal together. And, it was just one of those things that you always did. And I'm always a little stunned by that because I didn't come from that environment in terms of my college experience. But here at Lawrence, it's very, I should say it's expected, but and it's now, we've always done it for basketball and things like that. But now, even volleyball's involved, and the men's and women's soccer teams will play an alumni game. And, but the only thing we don't do is football. But we have done that in the past. The first year I was there, Dave Brown was our head coach, and they played a full contact alumni football game. Yes, I'm not sure why Brownie wanted to do that, but he did. And they had to be, there was probably, I would say 60 alums who showed up for that. And they split the teams in half. They had a blue team and a white team, and they played, and they didn't do the kicking part of it. So there was no kicking. There were no kick returns, no punt returns. So that took some of that out of it. So it was a little more like a controlled scrimmage, but it was live 11 on 11, and neither team was able to score. But I do remember Dick Napinski was there. Dick, who now does he does our live streams for football and basketball. But Dick was there writing a story for the Post-Crescent, and there were a bunch of Appleton East football kids there watching Pat Schwanke, who was playing.
Yep.
And one of them, as Schwanke was running down the field, one of the kids, he was right in front of the press box, so we could hear those guys talking, plain as day. And the kid said, "Man, is he slow?" And he was, yes. But it looked like the white team was going to score a touchdown because Rich Agnes, who's from the class of 67, was playing quarterback. And he throws one down the sideline, wide open. Stacy Seidel from the class of 1999. Exactly. So he had just graduated. And Seidel catches it, looks like it's going to be a touchdown, and from out of nowhere, Steve Young, Neenah High School football coach Steve Young, and Lawrence All-American, Steve Young comes out of nowhere and just absolutely blasts Seidel, lifts him off his feet, out of bounds, and no touchdown. So neither team scored. But there were probably, I'd say 400 to 500 people in the Bonta Bowl watching that. It was an absolute blast. So much fun. And no one got hurt. That was amazing. The amazing part. No serious injuries.
One of the things you bring up, and I remember this as coaching there as well, is the athletes, no matter what sport they play, it's like a family. And they all are together. They all know each other. And I don't know if it's the same today as it was when I was coaching baseball, but those players, for whatever sport it is, they all stick up for each other. They all look out for each other. And it is a unique atmosphere at Lawrence for sure. And that comes from the student side as well, I think.
They all, you're right. They all definitely, I mean, it's a small place. It's 1,500 kids. So, you definitely know a lot of the other athletes, but those kids will come out and watch the other teams play.
Yeah.
We played volleyball midweek against Carroll, and our volleyball team is in a rebuilding mode here because Meg Gross is the brand new coach. She wasn't hired until late spring, so really didn't have a recruiting class to speak of. So we were kind of, we're kind of starting from scratch. So we knew we weren't going to beat Carroll unless Carroll played its absolute worst match of the year. But yeah, there were probably, I'd say there were at least 100 student athletes in the crowd.
Nice.
And we actually, we actually played okay, played pretty well, lost in 3 sets, but we made it competitive. And yeah, every time we scored, man, the football guys and the hockey guys are going crazy along with the soccer girls. And
Yep.
I mean, it was a lot of fun, but that's pretty normal where you see, athletes show up to watch the other athletes.
Yeah.
And it is, and obviously now my daughter, Anna plays tennis and she runs track. So she knows a lot of kids, but, and she works for me. So she comes to a lot of games, but it is kind of amazing how, like she was telling me the other day, they were hanging out with one of the hockey guys. And I'm like, well, how do you really know him? And she's like, well, he's in one of my classes. And, so it was like 3 or 4 of us and we decided to go have coffee together. And I'm like, okay. But yeah, it's a small sort of tight knit group. And way back when the fraternities had a lot to do with that.
Yeah.
Because you had the Phi Delts, the 3 biggies were the Phi Delts, the Delts and the Betas.
Yep.
And traditionally the Phi Delts were the football guys and the wrestlers. The Delts were the baseball guys and the hockey guys, and the Betas were the swimmers. So now that has changed over the years. That population is a little more diverse, but in a lot of ways, that was kind of how they sort of all bonded together. And
right.
There's great support among the student athletes, and the kids, they really appreciate that. I think they get excited when, the other athletes that they know are in the stands cheering for them.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's what was fun about coaching as well, because you always had people in the stands, and that was the fun thing about coaching at Lawrence, and just seeing the excitement that those players had, like you said, because their friends are sitting there watching them, no matter what it was, no matter where it was.
And I always thought too that the way that Laurentians sort of show up no matter where we're playing, because we see that all the time where we're playing basketball at Lake Forest, let's say. And all of a sudden there might be a group of 20 Lawrence alums who come out to watch us play because they live in the Chicagoland area. Or the one that really sticks out for me was the 2004, the NCAA basketball tournament. So we won the opening round game at home. We beat Lakeland. Gary Gresh was the Lakeland coach back then, the St. Norbert coach. And that's a game he does not want to remember because I think we beat him by 38. But then we had to go to Buena Vista. So we went to Storm Lake, Iowa so we played Wednesday, went to Storm Lake, beat Buena Vista on Saturday, got back to Appleton at about 6:15 Sunday morning after driving all night back from Western Iowa. And then we left just a few days later to fly to Tacoma, Washington to play the Sweet 16 and Elite 8 games. Yeah. And, we get out there and, it was at the University of Puget Sound. And our alumni folks had put out, like an email to all the Lawrence alums in the Seattle area. And so when on that Saturday, we made it, we won Friday night against Sul Ross State from Texas, which I had never heard of until we played them. And then we ended up playing Stevens Point. And I would say it's the greatest Division III basketball game that no one saw. It was Elite 8. It was overtime. It went down to a final shot. It was amazing. I mean, it was 2 heavyweight champions just trading haymakers with each other, and they got the last punch in and beat us. Of course, they won the national title.
Was that a Jack Bennett team? Was Jack? points coach. Okay.
Correct. Jack. Yep. Jack was the coach. Nick Bennett, his son, was on the team, and Nick hit the 3-pointer that forced the overtime with Jason Hollenbeck.
Sure.
Absolutely draped all over him. I still can't believe that went in, but it did. And then we missed a 3 at the buzzer that would have sent us to the Final Four. But we had emailed Lawrence alums because there were only about 250 people at the game, but there were like 75 Lawrence alumni who showed up.
Yeah.
And we had way more fans there than Stevens Point did. And
That's awesome.
And that was all, told them it was going on, and they came out to support the basketball team. And I know our guys were just floored by the fact that there were so many Lawrence people in the building, and we almost won it for them. The final play there in overtime was, we were up 1 and Stevens Point hit a little jumper that put them up 1. And I remember looking up at the clock and it said 5.6 seconds. And Chris Breyer inbounded the ball to Dan Evans, who was our point guard. Yep. And Danny caught it like a wide receiver going across the middle, right? He catches it and cuts up the floor. And he ended up like cutting back to the right. And I think he told me later, and this was kind of in my head, I thought he's going to go to the basket and lay it in because no one was slowing him down. The pointers were kind of unorganized. And finally, Nick Bennett just kind of came out of nowhere, and he stepped up and forced Danny farther away from the lane. And he just kicked it out to Hollenbeck, who was wide open for a 3. And he just missed it. It just skipped over the rim. If he shoots it another 3 inches, it probably goes in and we win. And of course, Hollenbeck on the day, that was one of only 2 3-pointers he missed. He went 6 for 8 in the game on threes. And I know he felt terrible about it. And I told him after, I'm like, dude, if you don't make the first 6, we're in the game.
Exactly.
But, but that's like I said, I always say that's the best game no one ever saw because it wasn't live streamed back then. No one was doing that in 2004. The game was broadcast on WLFM on our camp. We had an over-the-air campus radio station then, and the game was broadcast on WLFM. But that was the only place you could hear it, and it was pretty wild.
Isn't it amazing how far sports have come here in 20 years? I mean, you're writing at the Post Crescent. That's how we get our news, and now everything's live streamed and it's social media. It's just incredible what's happened over the last 2 decades.
Yeah, my job has changed. It's nothing like when I started.
I believe it.
I believe when I started, that was the first incarnation of the Lawrence website. So lawrence.edu. And, we weren't even, I think the first time that we started posting box scores to the website was that spring baseball and softball season. Otherwise, we had never done it. And, I'm not sure the previous sports information director knew how. I didn't know how either. I figured it out. But, to go from there to now, yes, we're live streaming everything. And we've been live streaming probably since about 2006. So we were pretty early on doing that. But just the way the technology has changed and just the vast array of stuff that you can see on the website. I mean, we play, and within, 90 minutes of the game being over, there's a box score, there's a game recap. There might be a photo gallery of photos from that game because we have a great athletics photographer. His name is Paul Wilkie. He is phenomenal, and I couldn't do my job without him. He's just an amazing guy. So we have all that stuff where hey, your kid just played, and look, that's them scoring a goal,
right.
Or that's them scoring a touchdown, and you can download the photo, and you've got it for forever, which I think is just amazing. And then people will complain when we don't stream something, or the stream went out. Of course, as I always say, this is not as simple as turning on your television when we're live streaming an event.
Right.
So sometimes technical things do happen, but I always remind people, don't complain too much. It's free.
Right.
Right. Exactly.
Just remember it's free. But we are very fortunate in that regard too, because as I said earlier, Dick Napinski does our play-by-play for football and basketball. and he's great. I mean, Dick does a lot of other, games here locally with the radio stations and stuff. So, and then I do the play-by-play for hockey and for baseball and softball. So, and not to pat myself too hard on the back, but, we do get a lot of compliments about our live streaming and how good it is. And because a lot of these schools that we're playing, when you're down at Knox or you're at Illinois College or you're at Cornell, you might not be getting the same quality in the play-by-play guy as you're getting when you're playing at Lawrence. And so we're very fortunate. A lot of times when we're on the road, it's so bad I can't even listen to it, and I just turn the sound down. I just watch the video. But yeah, we're really lucky to have Dick. And then, like I said, it's a role that I've grown into. I had never done it before. I had never, ever done play-by-play until I started doing it here. And now it seems like second nature. I always say doing the baseball and the softball too, those are my favorite things. I mean, as Tosh knows, I'm through and through, I'm a baseball guy. I love baseball, and getting to call us winning a conference tournament championship, winning the conference title a couple years ago, that was a lot of fun.
Who do you draw your play-by-play influences from? I mean, so basically self-taught, it sounds like. Yep.
Yeah, self-taught. But I always say I'm definitely influenced by, 50 years of watching or listening to Bob Uecker. That definitely, because when one of our guys fires a fastball right down the middle, I will say bullseye, that's very much a Ueckerism. And I'll say that on the air too, where I will say to people, okay, it's a Bob Uecker thing. But yeah, I mean, that definitely, and when one just misses, I will throw out a shot the corner and miss.
Oh yeah. Here it is.
Because that's a Ueckerism as well. But yeah, I mean, he's definitely an influence on me. And I also, in the regard that when we're playing and, baseball, there's time, there's time where you can either let the dead air kind of hang there, or, if there's a pitching change, or because we don't have commercials. So, but it is funny though. We were making a pitching change, I think the other team was making a pitching change, and I looked down and I thought, the coach made the motion to the left field corner, and so the pitcher starts walking in, and I said, the U.S. Cellular call to the bullpen has been made. and I just said, we'll be back in about 30 seconds to tell you about the new pitcher. And I turned the sound down, and my student worker said, man, we have a sponsor for that? And I said, yeah, we do actually. But yeah, I love doing it. It's so much fun. But yeah, I've certainly listened to a lot of Uecker, and that definitely influences me. So I do like to be able to give some background, give a little color to the game, tell people about historical things that I know that other people don't, and just share some of that as well. Because to me, that gives you a little bigger picture about who we are and what we're doing and how we do it and how long we've been doing it and things like that.
Absolutely.
And I do. I mean, I love to tell. There are some stories I can't tell on the air. They're a little off color, as it were. But one of my favorites is still when we were playing UW Oshkosh at Fox City Stadium, and Tosh was in the dugout for this. Yeah. And oh my Lord, I'm drawing a blank on his name. Chris McGinley. Chris McGinley hit a home run against the Titans that almost cleared the scoreboard. I hit right near the top of the scoreboard. And let's just say that Tom Lechner, the UW Oshkosh coach at the time, was not real thrilled about that. And we ended up winning the game, the first game of a doubleheader.
Wow.
And that is still one of the longest home runs I've ever seen. The only longer one was a couple years ago where Jacob Sharon, there was the year 2021 where he hit, or 2022, where he hit 20 homers and he drove in 61, I think it was, in a 40 game season. Yeah. And he hit one over the left field fence at Ripon and onto the roof of their field house, which is about a 4-story building. So that one's pretty long, but I vividly remember the McGinley home run and Lechner's reaction to his team after they lost. And that's something I can't repeat. But
oh my gosh,
he was not happy. So
you remember it. They were number 3 in the nation at the time.
Correct.
And we went down the spring trip and didn't win a game.
Yep.
So,
we were like 0-8.
Yeah, it was crazy.
I think that was the year we went to like Virginia and North Carolina and just played like a murderer's row of non-conference teams down there. And then, came back here and beat the Titans, I believe. And that is the highest ranked team we've ever defeated in baseball.
Wasn't Ricky on the mound for that too? From Chicago?
I don't remember.
I think he was. Yeah, he might have been.
Could be.
Yeah. That was a bomb though. It was impressive.
Well, McGinley was a big man. He was 6'5" and like 260 pounds. He played quarterback one year at Lawrence. Yep. He also played defensive end during his football career at Lawrence. And he got worked out by the Packers. They were looking because he was the long snapper. So they came up here and worked him out. And the scout basically said, he's big enough and he's fast enough. He said, but, he's not exceptional enough where we would sign him because we can sign, we can get a Division I guy or whatever. And it would take too long to make him as good as we'd want him to be. And the Packers also worked out Chris Breyer as a potential football player. They looked at him as a tight end. So, because Breyer, and I'm not sure this is something that's common knowledge, but Breyer was asked to walk on to play football at Wisconsin. And he chose basketball at Lawrence instead. And of course, he was a 3-time All-American and the National Player of the Year. So I think he made a pretty good decision.
I think so. Well, I know we don't want to keep you all night here. I'm sure we could. We could talk for a while. What's something that you're really excited about coming up in the next few years, or something you see down the road with your job, with Lawrence, something that excites you that you're looking forward to?
Well, I think for me, I think there are a lot of possibilities right now where I think our women's soccer team is on the verge of being really good, where they can get back to the NCAA tournament. And because we haven't played in the NCAA tournament since 2010 in women's soccer. So I would love to see that again because they're close. So, it could happen as early as this year. That would be very exciting. And I love Joe Sager, our women's soccer coach. If you have not met Joe Sager, he is a treat. He is from Manchester, England, and he's just humorous. And he always has something interesting to say to an official every now and then. One of my favorite comments from him was there was a call that went against us, and I am sitting on the opposite side of the field because I'm in the Bontable press box, and he is on the east side of the field on the bench, and I hear Joe Sager say, "Don't worry, sir. I've seen even good officials miss that call." Needless to say, he immediately got a yellow card. But women's soccer, I'm very, like I said, I can see some really good things happening for them. And for me, boy, the baseball too. We got to the NCAA tournament, a couple seasons ago, and I think that is a distinct possibility again here in 2024. They have a great group of guys coming back, and Jacob Sharon is taking full advantage of the COVID situation and our new business major. He wants to add a business major because that's something new that we just added this last year. So he wants to complete his degree in that. So he is going to play a 6th season here in 2025 or 2024.
That's
so
awesome.
He will be back. So I'm really looking forward to those two. And then, boy, I just feel like we're right on the cusp with basketball of being really good. The two basketball coaches we have right now, Riley Wolt on the women's side and Casey Korn on the men's side, they are passionate, they are diligent, and they are pretty smart guys. And I definitely foresee both of those programs doing some really special things in the next, say, 5 years or so. I think they're really close. And for Casey, just keeping his group together will be, that's where that didn't happen this past off season. And with Riley, boy, like I said, he's got some really interesting players. So this could be a really good season, but would love to see some NCAA tournament basketball at Lawrence again. I mean, those are the things that really get me going. And then, of course, all the lacrosse thing, that's a new challenge for me because I am not a lacrosse guy. I don't know all the ins and outs of it. So I'm sure I'm going to have to buy the Lacrosse for Dummies book and do some serious studying here over the next year. But and Mikey's been great. He's so willing to help me learn the game because I definitely need to do that.
My youngest has picked it up, and he plays hockey, football, and lacrosse, and he says it's lacrosse is the most physical sport he plays.
Yep, I believe it.
So you're gonna enjoy it for sure.
I'm looking forward to seeing it. I've never seen it live in person, so that will be a new thing for me as well.
Fastest game on grass.
Well, Joe, I appreciate your time. Maybe in the future we can get back together again and talk all things Lawrence again. But this was awesome. Love your stories. I'm glad you didn't tell any stories about my days and Corey's days of coaching, because I'm sure there are some. I remember a ripping game at American Legion getting kicked out of. So,
I had forgotten about that. Actually, now that you mentioned that, I do remember that.
Yeah, that umpire and I did not see eye to eye. But hey, it was good. But thank you so much. You've done amazing things, and it was fun catching up. And those first 10 years of your career at Lawrence were when I was there, and it was always a blast to have you around. And I'm sure everybody there says the same thing now.
I appreciate the opportunity. Obviously I'm very passionate about Lawrence and love to talk about it, but we're kind of the hidden gem in the community. Absolutely. Here, and I always encourage people to come out because obviously most of the events, other than say football, basketball, hockey, everything else is free. You can come out and watch us play, and in some great historic venues like Alexander Gym and the Bonta Bowl, and that it's. I love that part. And there's, as much as, Whiting Field is not Yankee Stadium by any stretch, but nope. there's nothing like, you sit out there, you bring your lawn chair and you pull it up to the fence and, you can enjoy an afternoon of baseball. And
it's good baseball.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Chris Krepling has done an amazing job with the baseball program, and he's got some pretty good dudes on the team, and he's got some really good players who came in this year too. So, I'm excited for next spring.
In the history lesson you've given us, I cannot believe a creek runs under the Bonta Bowl. Never knew that.
It does.
Appletonian my whole life. Never knew that.
There are lots of, that whole area over there there have been so many kind of crazy historic things that have happened on our little plot of land over there. But it is. I feel very fortunate to have stumbled into this career because that's, I didn't do it intentionally. It just worked out that way. And I'm a better person for it. Very lucky.
Well, your passion definitely shows through. It's pretty incredible. So, well, thank you again. And, maybe we can, maybe once the baseball season or the basketball season here and we get some runs, and we can talk again and shoot the information about Lawrence a little bit more for this community.
That would be great. Once again, I really appreciate you guys having me.
Well, likewise.
All right. Well, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
All right, Tosh, we are back to throwback time, and we go back to the same year as last week with John Smotes. We go back to 2012. And we have a CBS announcer. The Red Smith group went with a long streak of CBS sports announcers, and Lesley Visser was one of those that year. But she was fantastic. I mean, she's had an incredible career. Very well known, has covered the top events ever.
Everything from Final Four to Monday Night Football to Triple Crown, Olympics, the Super Bowl. I mean, you name it, she was part of it for sure.
Yeah, she was the real deal for sure, and it is the real deal. And I certainly remember her growing up, and all through that. I think anybody younger than us even will know Lesley Visser, and she was fantastic when she came to the banquet. She came as a speaker, and she lived up to that for sure, Tosh. I mean, just smooth and great message, and just from a unique point of view. Things weren't always like they seem, and she was able to overcome and really be a superstar, a rock star.
Well, and she paved the way for a lot of sportscasters we have today. I mean, 2009, that's not that long ago.
Right. She
became the first woman to be an analyst for an NFL game on TV. That's crazy.
That is
really, truly crazy. She, 2006, she was recognized with the Pete Rozelle Radio Television Award by the Pro Football Hall of Fame. We can keep going here. American Sportscasters Association, #1 female sportscaster of all time.
Yeah.
National Sports Writers and Sportscasters Association Hall of Fame in 2015, and the International Sports Hall of Fame in 2020.
It's pretty good, huh?
Yeah. It doesn't get much better than that, does it?
2009, like you said, to be the first female to be a reporter in the NFL. I mean, you're right. That isn't that long ago. And I guess we've made pretty good strides. We can certainly do more.
Absolutely.
But you look at some of the great female reporters that have come through and are still doing the thing. Thanks to Lesley Visser. That's pretty cool. And it's great to have Lesley in Appleton. It's always, I just have to pinch myself when some of these people that you grow up watching on TV, they're in our backyard speaking at the local hotel. Iconic
sports announcer. I mean, one of the best, and right here in Appleton, Wisconsin at the Red Smith Sports Banquet. So we hope you enjoy this. And remember, if you really do enjoy this, check out the full interview on YouTube and get those snippets on the Newsa-Cast on Thursdays, full interviews on Sundays.
Red Smith Sports Awards Banquet Throwback.
The Red Smith Award, of course, goes to someone who has made some unique contributions to sport in Wisconsin, and also epitomizes the great values that Red Smith exhibited.
Let's give a Red Smith welcome.
And we're so pleased to have with us tonight Lesley Visser. Lesley?
Wow. Thank you, Chuck. No wonder I'm exhausted. I have heard so much about this banquet. It is everything that I thought it would be. Many of your speakers are great friends of mine. Jay Billis and Greg Gumbel last year, he said, you're just going to love it. The people are so real, and there are so many of you. I've given college graduation commencement addresses, and there weren't as many people as there are here. So thank you all so much for coming, and congratulations, especially to the parents and the coaches and certainly the young students, the award winners. Chuck, I'm glad you mentioned one thing, because we've all been here for a while, and I've heard a lot of colleges mentioned. We got Nebraska, we got Marquette, we got Colgate. What we got over here? We got Wisconsin, we got Green Bay. We even had almost Michigan State. I mean, a little love for Boston College. Do you mind? Does nobody send their kids to Boston College? Okay, one of the award winners, Sigi, thank you. Where's Katie? Katie's undecided. But yes, Katie, talk to me afterwards. And the gamblers, you're not doing enough. Really, you had a list this long. As I said, thank you to Mike Reese, to the sponsors, Chuck for introducing me. I'm so thrilled to be here. I first came to Green Bay in the late 70s. As Chuck mentioned, I was the first woman to cover the NFL, and I came here with the Boston Globe, and it was an immediate love affair. Anyone who knows me knows that for 35 years, when people ask me, what's your favorite place in America? I always say Lambeau in January. I do. I'm never colder, and I have covered games in Kansas City and Soldier Field and, even the old Cleveland Coliseum with that wind whipping off the lake, but I am never happier than I am here. People always ask, what are your favorite memories, moments in sports? And one of mine was certainly in 1996 when you trailed Carolina at halftime, but you came back to win to send the Packers to your first Super Bowl in 30 years. And one of my strongest memories is Reggie holding up the Hallis Trophy and running around the field as everyone stayed there, and the band played what, John Smoltz? Roll Out the Barrel. See, yes, you could have had a career here. Well, like some of the people here who talked about their childhood, I wanted to be a sports writer from the time I was 10 years old. And the job did not exist for women. If there's one thing all of you can take from me tonight, I hope it's that it doesn't matter if you're male or female, if you're black, if you're white, if you're Hispanic or Native American. The job didn't exist when I wanted to be a sports writer, did not exist for women. And if there's one thing you can take from me, it's that it can happen. You can do it. There is no mountain high enough. You heard from Aman, you heard from John. You just have to name it to claim it. And I said to my mother, I want to be a sports writer. I was 10 years old. We were living in Cincinnati. And my mom said, instead of saying, oh, girls don't do that, you can't do that, she said, you know what? Sometimes you have to cross when it says don't walk. And it was very powerful for me, and I just was able to, really have that dream and go after it. I was an unusual child. On Halloween, I would dress up as Sam Jones, the Celtic backcourt. Great Sam Jones. Other little girls were going as Mary Poppins. And I would have my number 24 shirt and my high-cut cons. So I'm sure that was a little unusual in Cincinnati, Ohio. But, the parents and coaches, you're all so important to your families and to the young people that you have charge over, because you can shape them. You do shape them. They shaped probably all of us up here on the podium. As Chuck mentioned, yes, when I started, the credentials did say no women or children in the press box, which was so diminishing. Imagine you're going off to your job, and right there on your credential, it says you're not really welcome. But the Boston Globe was so progressive, and they made me the first woman to cover the NFL, and it was the Patriots, and they were really glorious to take that risk with me and for me. But I learned humility quickly. There were no provisions for equal access, maybe the first 8 or 9 years I covered the NFL. So I'd be out in the parking lot waiting for the athletes to come out, and I'd be out there by myself freezing in Three Rivers or here in Lambeau, wherever it was. And I remember, actually, Mark and I were talking about this. There was a quarterback that you may not remember. He was with the Baltimore Colts, of course. People just remember Johnny Unitas, but do any of you guys remember a quarterback, Burt Jones? Yeah, remember Burt Jones? Yeah, Burt Jones, great, from LSU. So Burt Jones, I was single at the Boston Globe, and Burt Jones, as you remember, was like a real good-looking guy, young quarterback. So now I'm out in the parking lot waiting for them to come out. It was after a Patriots game. And Burt Jones said, hey, have you ever been to Baltimore? I could send you, it must have been Eastern Airlines then, I'll send you a shuttle ticket, you come on down. And I went into this thing, absolutely not, this is my job, I take it very seriously. And he finally hit me on the shoulder and said, hey, you're not that great. So I learned very quickly. I have lots of embarrassing moments if you want to hear them. Why sports? I thought then, as I do now, I think sports is the greatest meritocracy in America. In sports, it doesn't matter where your father went to college. It doesn't matter how much money your mother had. Either Amon got the first down. By the way, isn't your memory of Amon Green that every time he carried the ball, he got 10 yards? I swear, that was my memory. But it wasn't it really. Really. It's great to watch. So, that was... Amon did that, coming from Omaha. John threw his fastball by an awful lot of people and grew up, as he said, in modest circumstances in Michigan. And that really is what is just so great about sports. It's most of the people all of them are self-made, and they do their jobs in public, and everyone critiques them. And I just always had tremendous admiration for that. When I was inducted into the Pro Hall of Fame, I got a little note from John Madden that I've always cherished. You remember this, okay, for when you go in the Hall of Fame? And John wrote me a note, and he said, the Hall of Fame, it's not something you can be born into. It's not something you can buy your way into. It's something you have to earn your way into. And so I guess that kind of sums up my great respect I have for sports. I will finish by telling you that the greatest thing I think I ever learned in my almost 40 years now of covering sports was one year at Wimbledon, Billie Jean King, who was really my idol besides Sam Jones, who, by the way, if you ever see him, he begs me not to tell that story anymore about how every Halloween, but I loved him. But Billie Jean, I think, was really my idol. And one year at Wimbledon, she was always in the Wimbledon final, Billie Jean King, always in the Wimbledon final. And so one year I said to her over there, I said, Billie Jean, what is the pressure of always being in the Wimbledon final? And you know how sometimes you can hear something and it actually changes the chemistry of your brain? Billie Jean looked at me and said, "Are you kidding? Pressure is a privilege." And I've always, ever since that day, that's how I've tried to embrace it. And I hope for all of you that that's maybe something you can carry. So tonight, I thank you for the pressure and the privilege. Thank you.
All right. Everyone, it is time for that segment that we like to joke about and screw up the title, but it is the Forgotten and Never Forgetten. And this is where we take a look at the things that we truly want to forget. You don't want to remember them. They should be gone, but you also have to think about those things that you never want to forget. They're never forgotten.
Right.
So, Joe, I'm going to let you take it to start with. What do you want to forget?
Well, Tosh, it's actually something I thought I did forget, but I almost got reminded that I forgot about it because it came back to me. So I don't know if I'm even in the right category, but we're going with it. Frasier. So I don't watch a lot of TV, but I just happen to have the TV on, flipped around, and there's this new Frasier that came out. But I mean, I know you and I were Frasier fans back in the day. I know I spent I don't know, early Netflix or something like that, watching the whole series. I think it was one of my all-time favorite just sitcoms. So funny. But I had forgotten about Frasier, and I'm actually kind of excited that it's coming back. I watched just the first episode. It was decent, it was Frasier.
Okay.
But I had forgotten about him, and I've always loved him. Even back to the Cheers days.
Yeah, that's one that kind of slides back and forth between the two, Joe.
Yes,
but that's good. I want to forget, and I think I've said it in a podcast before, but we're getting to that point where we don't see a lot of construction, but it's still there.
Yeah,
and I'm getting sick of it, especially 441. Hopefully, they're going to start finishing that up. But there's still orange barrels and cones everywhere throughout the city. And I know we're getting to the end of that construction season, but it's time to forget that. forget that construction. I'm kind of done with it.
Yeah, Tosh, I think every morning when I'm watching the weather, they put the traffic right there with the weather, and they always have a camera right there at College or Calumet and 441. And
all right,
nothing but,
and all you see are taillights.
You got it. Yep. You got it. Today was glossy taillights with the wet.
Yeah. But you know what? What you just said takes me into my never forgetting.
Yeah, what aren't you forgetting?
And thunderstorms.
Yeah.
I love a good thunderstorm.
I almost went with that tonight.
Did you? I don't care if it's the end of October.
Yeah.
A good thunderstorm and at night, and you hear that thunder and you see the lightning.
Yes.
There's nothing like that. It's better when it's the middle of summer and your windows are open and you kind of get the smell and everything else. But I tell you what, that thunderstorm this morning, we're doing this on Tuesday, the 24th.
Yes.
That was a good thunderstorm. And you know what? I don't want a thunderstorm that's going to cause a lot of damage and stuff. I just want a good old fashioned thunderstorm. Yeah. And that was a good thunderstorm this morning.
That was about perfect. I actually biked through it on the way back home, but I was prepared for it. It was actually kind of cool when you're ready for it. It's actually kind of neat to have the lightning going around you, but it was warm today. It was so nice.
Yeah, it was
with that. And tonight, even before we recorded, like I said, I almost went with that because it felt like a summer night. I was sitting out in the back porch for a little bit, and I mean, it was still just thick, humid air with you could hear the thunder, the lightning. It wasn't a huge storm, but it felt like I love it, Tosh, a summer thunderstorm.
So what are you never forgetting?
Well, I'm excited to never forget this. You and I think have hinted about it a little bit through the last, all the episodes, but it's official. Lacrosse is in the 2028 Summer Olympics in Los Angeles.
Oh,
it's
nice.
going to be, I think it's going to be 6-on-6, but I'm not 100% sure on that. But regardless, lacrosse is going to be in the Olympics. And
it'll be great.
Kind of as a side note as well, flag football as well is going to be. And in fact, it was funny because I don't remember what players it was, but some players of note, I bet you that's going to be a competitive team. Flag football,
Absolutely.
Like ex-athletes, former NFL guys all playing. That'll actually, I think, be a lot of fun to watch. Yeah,
I agree with you. That's going to be exciting. Those two interesting sports, and it's going to be, lacrosse is going to be amazing, but flag football is going to be fun.
Yeah,
I have a feeling that's going to be a lot of fun to watch, and it'll be interesting to see who comes out and, plays for that team. You get some ex-NFL quarterbacks and wide receivers and things like that. So yeah, that'll be cool. Absolutely. Well, that's good, Joe. That'll be fantastic. Olympic Games 2028.
Yes. Can hardly wait, Tosh. Can hardly wait. All right.
Well, that was our F&F, our Forgotten and Never Forgetting. Hope you enjoyed that, and continue to hit those socials and like and subscribe. All right, Joe, that was another great episode of the Newsa-Cast. Where do you think they can listen to more of these?
Well, Tosh, there's a couple of places they can go. One place, relatively new, a little thing called iTunes. And another thing, too, I think this just started as well, Spotify. So those two new services, why don't you go check those out? There's little buttons there, little plus buttons that you can hit that, hey, it really helps us out, Tosh, when they hit those buttons.
Absolutely. And they can also go to YouTube and check out the full throwback on Sunday mornings.
If you ever wondered what we look like, Tosh, check out YouTube, right?
Absolutely.
Good luck, folks. Thanks for listening to the Newsa-Cast. We appreciate your support. If you haven't yet subscribed, please do so and tell a friend. A huge thanks to Digstown for all the music in today's episode. Catch a gig or find them on Spotify. Northeastern Wisconsin Sports Advancement is a 501c3 organization. Our mission is to raise money, provide support, and create awareness for youth sports organizations in northeastern Wisconsin. We do this primarily through the Red Smith Sports Award Banquet and the Newsa-Cast. Each year, we give back to the community through 3 initiatives: the Every Kid Plays, the Gives Back Initiative, and scholarships to student athletes.